Welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. And for this week's episode, we are talking about the gift of slowing down. One of the biggest challenges, I think, of having a chronic condition such as chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia or ME is that we're forced to slow down. And when something is forced upon us, often it's hard to see the value or see the gift in that. That I certainly remember as someone who was a fairly kind of busy and dynamic teenager that loved kind of sport and music and all those kind of things. Anyone suggesting that there was a gift in me being forced to slow down, that would have been frustrating and annoying to say the least. And yet, one of the things that I realized looking back in hindsight, as much of what was enormously challenging and difficult about those years, there were some incredible gifts that came from being forced to slow down and take time. Indeed, one of the things that I've deliberately done in my adult life in the years since then is to take time away from the busyness and the demands of daily life to slow down and reflect. Someone that has 3 young children, very busy work life with projects and all the things that are going on. It's easy to get consumed by that. And it's easy to get kind of pulled into the vortex of endless doing and activity. But when we do that, often what happens is we lose perspective. We lose clarity. As I've talked about in previous videos, disconnect feeds disconnect. The more disconnected we get, the more we tend to choose habits and behaviors that disconnect us further. And the reason why there were no uploads last week is I was away on a week's writing retreat or writing holiday. And I went for a period of 2 to 4 weeks a year. Every year I would go off on retreat and I would do meditation and various other practices. I'm not at this point part of any active retreat group. And so I deliberately take the time for myself. And I particularly find if I'm working on a book, it's much easier to do that when I have the time and the space to reflect. But in some ways, working on a book is an excuse really, because what I find is clarity, particularly in kind of our life and the directions that our life is going in. Clarity and perspective take time and take space. It's hard to find those when we're kind of very task orientated, or we're kind of deadline oriented on kind of things that need to be done and places we need to be and things that need to happen. The disconnect feeds disconnect, as I say, another way is it's like a hamster wheel. You just kind of get caught on that. And there is real value in stepping back, taking time, actively working to slow things down and letting perspective and clarity come from doing that. And that's where chronic illness, as much as it can be an enormously challenging experience, there is also the gifts that can come from that. And one of those gifts is slowing down, is connecting with the body, with finding ways of relating to ourself and our life and the people in our life, which is not just on the automatic defaults, is not just on the kind of habituated responses that we have. But here's the thing. There's likely many of you watching this video are don't feel like you're having the gift of slowing down. You're having the pain or suffering of being forced to slow down. But my invitation to you is to see if you can see the gift and the opportunity in that. It's very easy when we're in a difficult situation to focus on the things that we don't have, to focus on the frustration, to focus on all the things that we want to be busy to do, all the events we want to be able to go to, seeing people, having a career, whatever it may be. And if we're not able to do that, we fixate on that, we focus on that. And I'm not trying to negate the emotions around that. There's a place to feel that. But also recognizing that this amount of time with yourself, which may not be what you want, but time with yourself, with your emotions, with the opportunity to really practice landing in and connecting more deeply and more fully in your body, gives you the capacity to have a different perspective and different clarity on your life. And in the years that I was ill, I radically, I guess, changed my attitude, my beliefs, my values of what I thought was important for myself and for my life and for the things that mattered. And that came from the slowing down. That came from taking the time to really sit with and really think about these things. And I think that there is a real difference between taking 20 minutes, half an hour on a busy day to do some meditation or yoga practice, or on a weekend going off for a walk for a few hours and spending some time with people. There's a real difference between that and having proper space, like multiple days or a week or multiple weeks, where we're stepping outside of our normal routine and our normal kind of habits and structures. And so for those of you not in a kind of enforced gift of slowing down at this point, how can you slow down more? How can you take more time for cultivating clarity, for perspective, for reflection, for really considering where your life is going? For those of you that are forced into that situation, how do you see the opportunity? How do you make the most of that? I don't look back, and I've said this in other videos, I don't look back, obviously, and miss the years that I was ill for obvious reasons. But there are times where I missed the amount of space and time there was for reading and for growth and for self-reflection and for really taking time to sit with and consider what matters most. And I would argue that a lot of the hopefully good decisions that I've made in my life since then have been a result of that time of really, and even now, 20 or something, almost 20 years later, this ripples are still there of those decisions that came from that time and from that reflection. One of the things also that I think is interesting is if we haven't chosen that gift of slowing down and we're kind of forced into that time, one of the things we can find ourselves doing is filling all the space, being busy with always, listening to something or watching something or being busy in our mind in terms of repetitive patterns. So it's almost like we're avoiding connecting in and feeling and slowing everything down into our experience. So sometimes part of what we need to do is it's not just the space, but it's actually utilizing the space that's there. And it's learning to be comfortable with quietness, learning to be comfortable with being in our body, with having time and space that's not being kind of constricted and constrained and being filled. So I'm curious, perhaps in sharing the comments, what your relationship is like with slowing down. Do you let yourself take time to feel, to connect, to be with your experience? Or are you always busy or always trying to fill your experience with activity or thinking? I find, and it was the same last week, being this beautiful meditation center, very cold, but beautiful meditation center in France, that sometimes the greatest clarity just comes from going for a long walk, or sitting and meditating and just being quiet and not like actively trying to get clarity, but making the space for the ideas and the perspectives to come forward. And I know some of the best decisions in my life, some of the best ideas in my professional work have come from creating space and allowing that to come forth and to come forwards. So I hope that's been a helpful invitation to slowing down and taking more space. Tomorrow's Feel Good Friday is going to be kind of related to this. It's an excerpt from my interview with Louisa as part of the Fatigue Super Conference. We were talking about overcoming the achiever pattern. In a sense, the biggest obstacle to slowing down and taking space is the pressures and the demands of our achiever and our feeling like we need to do to feel like we have value and have worth. So that's coming up tomorrow on Feel Good Friday here on Everyday Alex.